Nilfgaard is known as the largest empire the continent has ever seen. But how did it get so massive? How did Nilfgaard conquer over half the continent within half a century? In this video, I'll go through the Nilfgaardian expansion up until the moment when they were just about to invade Cintra. Nilfgaard, under Emperor Fergus for Emrys, decided to expand its influence. And there were three possible kingdoms for the Emperor to invade first. Aetolia, Vicovaro, and Gemmera. Gemmera was home to many harsh and strong warriors and had been a problem for Nilfgaard for a while. Vicovaro, on the other hand, was filled with many defensible castles in their mountains. These two kingdoms were both too tough of an opponent to start with, and so they went for the third kingdom, Aetolia. Aetolia was made up largely of farmers and fishers who just desired to live in comfort rather than to fight each other. Aetolia had a few soldiers, but not enough to have been considered a full-on army. Nilfgaard, on the other hand, had an army. The king and his people were not prepared for Nilfgaardians, and they were utterly destroyed. Nilfgaard used their kingdom as a warning for what would happen if people don't surrender to them. Then the spirit of the Aetolians was broken. It was broken so badly that in 40 years after that, no one tried to even raise a finger against the Nilfgaardians. Nilfgaard, now enriched with the grain and fish from Aetolia, set out to Vicovaro. Vicovaro had seen what had happened to Aetolia, and even though they knew that they might hold off Nilfgaard for a while, the Vicovarans were aware that Nilfgaard would eventually get to them. And so, instead of fighting Nilfgaard, they graciously asked to join their empire. The Vicovarans adapted and learned to behave just like the Nilfgaardians. This gave them a lot of favor with the empire and its nobility, leading to Vicovaro nobility being allowed even in the government of the Nilfgaardian Empire. With the two kingdoms down, Fergus had set his eyes on the most difficult one yet, that bordered his empire. Gemmera. Gemmera was a harsh and dry land. Their inhabitants were warriors, miners and bandits, and they wouldn't go without a fight. And so Nilfgaard gave them exactly what they wanted. The Nilfgaardian army didn't really care for the land itself for the most part. To them, the people and its minds were the most important part. These tough men made excellent fighters, and Fergus really wanted them in his army. This was also the only land in the south in which Dimeritium could be found. In order to take this land, Nilfgaard cleared out the eastern half of the kingdom, leaving little more than a few wandering goat herders. Just as Fergus had hoped, the strongest and fiercest Gemmerians joined his army for the opportunity of loot and mayhem. He had now gained new soldiers that were taller, stronger, and wielded swords which were over 2 meters long. They, however, were still more like glorified bandits and required twice the regular amount of supervision to make sure they didn't do anything that the Empire didn't want of them. Fergus had built a small empire. He, however, got in trouble with the nobility back in Nilfgaard, as he was seen as weak. He was killed by the Usurper, who took the throne and became Emperor of Nilfgaard. He continued what Fergus had started, and marched further north with his armies. Just north of the border of the Empire was Ebbing. A large part of the land had almost no population by itself. If reclaimed from a marsh in a swamp, however, it was very fertile. Ebbing was a mess when Nilfgaard arrived. The king had recently died and left behind a quadruplet of heirs, all fighting each other over the throne. At first, they sought out to make a deal with the kingdom, using diplomacy. But as the powers in Ebbing kept changing, the usurper lost his patience and eventually sent in his soldiers. The mess that was Ebbing had no chance. They were not prepared. Their armies were led by people with titles rather than by those who had the most experience. A lot of soldiers died, and the nobility of Ebbing fled. The inhabitants of this kingdom were tired of the mess that was their government, and decided they were better off living under Nilfgaardian rule. The Usurper wanted to push to Metinna, which was famed for its horses. However, by pushing to Metinna, he would expose himself and his empire to Macht. Macht wasn't much of a battle. It was quickly defeated, and the Usurper installed a puppet king to keep the kingdom in check. As Macht was dealt with, Nilfgaard pushed on to Metinna. 2/3 of the kingdom of Metinna exists out of the Magdaira plains. They know that the Nilfgaardian army would destroy them, and so they joined the empire rather peacefully. The king of Metinna pays tribute to Nilfgaard, in the form of horses and horsemen. Even after having conquered 6 kingdoms, Nilfgaard wasn't satisfied yet. They wanted more, and so they headed for Geso, a kingdom which is the access point to the Korth Desert. Geso is a great example of why you shouldn't try and think you can negotiate with Nilfgaard. The Baron of Geso surrendered when Nilfgaard came close. This resulted in Nilfgaard sending a small force for occupation, which in turn led to the Baron thinking he could dictate terms to the army, and that proved how wrong he was. As a result, the population was decimated and most of the country was destroyed. The inhabitants of the kingdom were replaced by Nilfgaardians, and Nilfgaardian noble families were given the task of ruling there now. The problem was that the Nilfgaardian families that had been sent there to rule didn't really like each other, and instead they started to have conflict and battle each other over and over again, resulting in the land falling into chaos and disarray, with a lot of bandits, slavers and other criminals lurking around every corner in Geso. Their infighting led to instability and a lack of government. To this day, Geso still lacks any form of government.
Your Grace, I know you have no reason to trust us, but we are not enemies. We hail from Geso, a land Nilfgaard conquered and made its province. We did not ask to fight in this war by force, we were conscripted.
The soldier hefted his sword by the blade and handed it, hilt first, to the queen.
We yearned for a way to desert, and we have found it. Your Grace, allow us to join your army. We long for the Empire's defeat every bit as much as you do.
But not every kingdom they conquered was that easy. Nazir proved quite the fight. They were way better prepared and armed than most of the kingdoms that Nilfgaard had faced on the way north. But still, Nilfgaard proved too strong. After a difficult battle, the kingdom fell. The people, however, never stopped fighting. And there were plenty of Naziri who would rather fight Nilfgaard and die than help them. In order for Nilfgaard to have conquered every single piece of land south to the Amel Mountains, they had only one kingdom to conquer that remained: Magturga. Magturga is very isolated, with its thick forest and large cliffs. They knew that they would be able to make it very difficult for the Nilfgaardians. The terrain was very inhospitable, and the Magturgans had a very large advantage there. So they also knew that Nilfgaard was so large that they couldn't evade it forever. And therefore Magturga joined the empire peacefully. And now the final piece of land before they went on and conquered Cintra: Toussaint. Toussaint you will know probably as it's being part of Nilfgaard. However, it was never really conquered by Nilfgaard, yet it's part of their empire. This is mostly due to the relationships between the Var Emrys family and the ducal family of Toussaint, as they were connected by marriage many decades before Nilfgaard arrived at the borders. See, a brother of Fergus Var Emrys was married to the ducal royal family, which made it way easier for Toussaint to just say, okay, we're part of you now. And that's where Nilfgaard's at, right before they enter the north, and try to their hand at completely conquering every piece of land west of the Teetershare and Blue Mountains. Nilfgaard isn't a stable empire. Nazir and Macht are mostly constantly trying to get Nilfgaard out of their land. Geso is a criminal mess, and in Ebbing they might possibly be organizing aardvark pit fights. Everything is kind of weird. This is why Emir for Emreis is getting so much pushback from Nilfgaardian nobility back in the capital. He keeps expanding the empire, yet the empire is still very divided, making it dangerous for Nilfgaard to lose too much time in their fight against the north. If they lose too much soldiers, they don't have enough to defend what they already have. They don't have enough to make it sure that Nazir and Macht don't separate themselves again. So he has to keep an eye on what he already has, while at the same time he tries to conquer more to the north. In this video I discussed how Nilfgaard expanded over the years. There, however, is not much information about Nilfgaard from the time in the books, and therefore a lot of information in this video was from the Witcher pen and paper RPG. This means that if in the future there are more books written, that this video might have some contradicting information, but this is considered canon to the games, as it was licensed by CD Projekt Red. I just quickly wanted to talk about a video I'm still working on at the moment, Philippa Eilhart. At the moment I've gone through the books and games to collect the information and notes about her, which I would need to start writing the script. And it's currently about 12 pages. If I translate just the notes into a video script, like let's say the video script is the same length as the notes, that would mean that the video will probably most likely be around 30 minutes or longer. So, yeah, I'll try to get it done next week, but it may take a bit longer. If you've got any suggestions for other videos, I would really like to hear them. So, till the next video. Bye.